Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Megan,
This is Joe Smith.
and we're super excited to be doing yet another. We keep making it happen. I don't know how we're doing it, but we have another live podcast recording today with our wonderful guest, Amanda. Also, you can call her Mandy Ralston, who is going to be talking to us about a wide array of topics. Well, maybe not wide array. It depends on how deep we dive in on certain things. But Amanda, how are you doing today?
Good enough. Yep. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so excited. I keep having conversations with Joe, or like while we're having our podcast episodes, I'll mention, especially when we start talking about AI, I'm like, make sure
Mhm.
everyone checks out Amanda because it's amazing. We need to all be keeping an eye and getting engaged with the work that you're doing. So I'm really happy that
Mhm.
we get to have this conversation. So I'm
Oh,
going to ask
thank
you
you.
the first question. I'm just going to dive
Okay.
right in. You and I both are what apparently a lot of people in the field are calling ourselves dinosaurs at this point, because we've been, working in the field for 20 or more years and have kind of see a lot of the transitions and shifts that have been happening. And we could probably spend the whole podcast with you telling us about your background and all of the different career moves you've made. But I was wondering if you want to share some highlights with us first so folks can get to know you a little bit better if they don't already.
Sure. Yeah. I wrote a paper about autism in 1999, my senior year at Spender College in Danville, Kentucky. And my psychology textbook had exactly two paragraphs about autism. At the time, it said that one in every 10,000 individuals were diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, and that the quote unquote gold standard of treatment for autism was something called applied behavior analysis. So I wrote a research paper about it that semester, and that's how I first learned about ABA and autism. And I met seven families up here in Lexington, Kentucky, that were flying a consultant out from California once a quarter to cobble together ABA programs by training their family and independent contractors that were high school and college students to implement these programs 35, 40 hours a week. And so I became a technician with those seven families. That was my first foray into the field, and just instantly became hooked on how different all these individuals were, and what their lives were like, and the things that impacted them and what made them happy, and teaching them to communicate and all those types of things. So yeah, I learned about certification because there was this guy, Dr. Vincent Carbone, that was touring all over the place and doing these workshops about what was wrong and outdated with some of the teaching practices that had been used historically within ABA. And started following him. I say I lightly stalked him all over the United States, his different workshops, and eventually went to Jacksonville, Florida to do a 90-hour week boot camp for 2 weeks, and basically got grandfathered into the BACB by this new program for the BC ABAs, right? And so I sat for my exam in 2001 in Nashville, Tennessee, using a number two pencil and a Scantron machine, and had wait many months into 2002 before I actually got the results that I passed. And so then I spent the next 2 decades building two different clinics in Kentucky, and I sold the last one in 2019 before I started non-binary solutions, where I'm now making clinical decision co-pilot software. So yeah, bit of a dinosaur over here. The number two pencil, like not only a number two pencil, but when Carbone was giving me my supervision to sit for the exam, I was mailing VHS tapes back and forth in the mail to demonstrate my procedures to him. And then we talked on a landline to review all of my procedures. Like, that's how old I am in
I
this
think you
field.
just
So
mentioned like three or four things that people in their 20s probably never have even seen. The
yeah,
Scantron, the VHS, a landline phone.
right. Like there's the like I am the target audience for a certain amount of the emojis on your iPhone that you 20-year-olds have no idea what those are. Like the floppy disks, that's my life.
Well, Well, that's wonderful. Thanks for sharing your history with us. And we have Nicole just joined us, who's one of our Trailblazer members. Hi, Nicole. So she may or may not have some questions too, if you're okay with that, Amanda. All right.
Of course.
Joe, do you want to take away with our next question?
Yeah, so I know that you're working on a few different projects. And we're going to dive deeper into like each one or maybe one specifically today. But can you talk more about just quickly on some of your other projects other than the AI that you're working on?
Sure. Wow, I do have a lot of stuff going on. All right, so Non-Binary Solutions is the company, that's the tech startup, right?
Mm.
Um, and it is the maker of the technology, the software, which is called Knowetic. So Knowetic is spelled Knowetic.ai. That's the website to go to find out about the software. And then the third website of interest, possibly, is the Center for Neurodiversity Innovation. That is a nonprofit that I've founded recently to help support constituents of neurodiversity, whether through that education, hosting events, and bringing neurodivergent minds in as thought leaders to what solutions need to be developed within their space to impact their quality of life, and finding out how to make neurodiversity more equitable within society. There is also my pet project, literally catsdon'tgiveafuck.com. That's where my cats have their own social media page, and I use that to amuse myself on a daily basis. But yeah, let's talk about Noetic, I guess. So Knowetic.ai is a subscription as a service software platform. And basically, it's a digital co-pilot, like having a little miniature Mandy on your shoulder to guide you through treatment pathways, right? So instead of Clippy, you get me, right? And so the software starts with a module that's called the Care Navigation module. And what that does is takes you through a very dynamic but standardized intake process to understand who is this particular person coming into your care. So it's designed for clinicians to be the users, and it's interactive with the caregiver, parents, or individual with autism or their neurodivergent diagnosis themselves, right? So you're interviewing the person and filling out the software at the same time. And what that does is it builds a behavioral profile of that individual for you and gives you this report at the end that says, here's everything you told me about this person. And based on what you've told me, we're going to recommend these action items, which may be things like a sleep study to rule out seizure disorders, or it could be this person needs a referral to a food selectivity specialist because they only eat 5 things, or we need to make sure that there's no physiological reason that we shouldn't go ahead with toilet training, and so on and so forth. So it builds recommendations based off of the algorithms that I've built into it as a practitioner of 25 years, right? So that's not AI, that's logic-based clinical decision support systems, right? So you get care navigation that says, who's this person coming into your care? And then the second module within the software is called the goal development model. And what that does is it takes, again, an interview format with you as the user, the clinical person, and the caregivers or the individual who is receiving care. And it ties socially valid, medically necessary quality of life outcomes to different assessment tools, et cetera. So really tying together medical necessity and quality of life into a treatment package that builds out 6-month goals for you. And then the third module within that software for the initial release here is the intensity forecasting, which is, again, based on the algorithm that I built. It's not based on AI at this point. It says, based on everything you told us, we think that this individual fits into about this bucket of hours of services, right? And that's just a forecast. So the important thing to know with all of this software is that these are just recommendations. It's not making decisions for you, right? This is meant to uh, support and bolster the clinical decision making. It is not meant to replace it. at all, right? And so you are allowed as a user to say, I agree or I disagree with any of the recommendations that are given by the software. And that way we continually get updated data from the users about what they are finding effective and what they disagree with and how we might want to update our algorithms in the future. So I'll stop talking for a second so you can ask a follow-up question or two.
Thanks, Mandy. I have tons of things I could say, but I'm super curious, Joe and Nicole, if you want to participate with us too. You're like a guest question asker today. Based on that description, for both of you are, you know, I know, Joe, you've did the trial with Mandy. Nicole, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to learn about Knowetic yet. So see what questions or thoughts you all have, and then I'll dive in on mine.
I mean, I know, like for me, like that, I love the fact that you really pointed out that either like this software is great, but at the end of the day, it's the clinician that is making a final determination whether or not to implement this suggestion or not. And I think that's really important for us as we continue this process of incorporating AI or understanding like where does AI fit in um our practice, like where does that fit in that we are using these suggestions, and like at the end of the day, like it's ultimately your decision and your call. And it just because we're utilizing this doesn't mean that we're completely, you know, taking out the clinician's ideas at all, which I really appreciate and love.
Yeah, no, this software has been used in healthcare for 50 years now. Like it is getting better and better within the medical community. When you go to the doctor, when you go to your general practitioner and you sit there and you start talking to them, they're saying, what brings you in today? How long have you been taking that? So on and so forth. They are using a clinical decision support technology. That's exactly what they're using. It's just that we're the first ones to be building this around the neurodivergent conditions at this point, right? And so again, doctors are not just listening to AI tell them what to do. They still need all of the training and experience that they had in order to come to the treatment decisions that they arrive at. But the software is helping them aggregate huge amounts of information and narrow the scope of the decisions that they need to make so that they are far closer to the correct solution rather than having to consider all those data points themselves in an instant, right? That's
Yeah,
the benefit of using this technology.
which is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh, go ahead.
go ahead, Nicole, if you have anything, Nicole.
Do you want to say your comment out loud, or did you want me to read it? Okay. As someone that considers myself an editor rather than a writer, I love the idea of having a jumping off point and a series of checks and balances. That's what Nicole said.
I love that. That's an excellent way of thinking about it, right? Yeah, I mean, where we're going with all this, again, all of the software in terms of the treatment pathways are algorithmic based on my experience, my practitioner experience. And so when we have enough data from usership and have enough patients that are in the data set that are now standardized, right? So it's not just like we dumped everybody's different data collection data into one big pot. The way that it comes into the system is standardized. That's the same questionnaire is done every single time with that care navigation model, right? So that we have apples to apples data set comparison points. When we have a big enough data set, then we can start to employ machine learning with that data set. And the machine learning will be able to say, these individuals look similar and these individuals look similar, right? And what do we know about these types of individuals when they get X amount of treatment intensity over X amount of years, right? What kind of outcomes do we tend to see happen given different intervention types, different types of assessment tools that were used? Like that's the bigger, longer goal over 3 to 5 years and what will happen with this data set. And so that's when the AI comes in later for the algorithmic portion of the software. But in the meantime, we've got this little guy. If I can get him to come
There
up.
you
Oh, there he is. Yeah. So this is No Yeti, right? And so I like to say that Knowetic takes the mystery out of treatment planning, right? Or a little cryptozoologist character. He is an AI chatbot, and he lives in the corner of the software. And his whole job is to be able to read records, right? So as you are completing the care navigation model and it says, does this child have an IEP? If you say yes, it asks you to upload that IEP. And Knowetic can instantly read all of the pages, all of the words in the IEP. So you could say at that point, does this child have any goals related to handwriting? And it would immediately answer you within 10 seconds and say, yes, I found on page such and such that this particular student has this goal related to handwriting. Um, if you say, has this child had a medical evaluation? And you say yes, and you upload that child's medical evaluations to Knowetic, again, it would be instantly able to read the entire medical evaluation. You could say, what tests were run with this student or child? What different diagnoses did you rule out? What diagnoses did you actually give to this person? And boom, it would immediately be able to read it for you. Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I know for a fact that part of our um, initial assessment process is a records review, right? I'm going to tell you, I don't think everybody's sitting down to read all 200 pages of the records that they got handed over with the new client of theirs. They're probably skimming, they're getting the basics. What if you had this tool that could actually read all that stuff with you so that you could ask direct questions and still be able to go back and verify, right? And trust but verify. You don't just blindly believe everything that's happening with the chat bot, but at least it gives you a shortcut. And as you said, Nicole, this is a way to get an outline before you have a jumping off point of writing your treatment plan, right?
Yeah. And I think even if people are being thorough with it, there's still things you're going to miss if 200 pages as a human that a chat bot is likely not going to, especially, when it's created properly. And we already know that people are using things like ChatGPT or other AI related, and those aren't HIPAA compliant. Those don't meet any certain standard. They weren't programmed by a dinosaur in the field, like all of that kind of stuff, but it's being done. So people have already talked about, obviously training and different things are going to have to go into place for folks in every field around the ethics and legalities and all of that relating to AI. I have other things I want to say, but just because you mentioned it, Mandy, I'm curious. I don't know if you mentioned this already and I missed it, but I'm guessing for Knowetic, there is that whole process. If people are using it for clients and things, that it's HIPAA compliant and all of that type of stuff that, we would need as behavior analysts or other medical professionals.
Yes, it is HIPAA compliant. The difference between Knowetic and Knowetic and a system like ChatGPT is that ChatGPT lives on the entire internet, right? That's the data set that it is learning from, and that's the data set that it is drawing from. Whereas Knowetic only knows the documents that you upload into the software. It does not go onto the internet. No patient information ever goes outside of the software. So all it knows literally is the patient that you are talking about and to when you are in that patient's file. So it can't even cross hallucinate, if you will, between two different patients that are in the software. It only knows the universe of the child that you're actively talking about in that chat session, and it also forgets everything the second you close the chat, right? So it's not going to again hallucinate based off of a past conversation that you had with it about somebody else. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So exciting. So one of the things you've mentioned a few times, and I just think we need to really highlight the importance of, is that that Knowetic has been trained based off of your clinical experience. And we've talked about your clinical experience. You took the test when it was pencil and paper. And I know there are some people in the field who maybe would have taken the exam or were in the field before the exam even existed as behaviorists, getting their PhDs. There's some folks who have their PhDs that teach behavior analysis that aren't certified, which is wonderful. That's no requirement necessarily. They probably have more knowledge about behavior analysis than most certified people, especially with how long they've been in the field. However, there's also people, I think, who've been in the field for a really long time who maybe kind of learn a thing and that's the thing, and they just sort of stick with it. And that, like, you know, for example, with some of the advancements that have been made in functional analysis with the work of Hanley and colleagues, and how there's certain behavior analysts who are like, absolutely not, that's not how you do an FA. Right? So this progression of a science that should happen. Now, I mean, you can obviously speak to this yourself. I've known you for a long time just through you and your work, and not necessarily personally, but I've observed all of these things with you. And you're, for me, one of the clinicians who stays on top of all of the things, not even just in behavior analysis, but you're just like a trendy person, if you will. Like you know what's happening out in the world, right? Like you're informed in a lot of different ways. So I think it's important to really make sure, whether we want to talk in more detail about it or not, but that's one of the things that was coming up for me, is how many people in our field we have. I haven't seen the numbers lately, but I know I made a CE certificate for someone who was certified in 2024, and they were like 65,000 something or other. So I would guess we're close to, if not at the 70,000 mark for just BCBAs, let alone BCABAs and RBTs and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm curious, like, when we think about the training programs and the process that people get right now, the fieldwork experience that they're having, how many are getting the opportunity to learn from someone like yourself or myself, who have a really in-depth level of clinical experience that incorporates a lot of analysis and problem solving and synthesizing of information from not just behavior analysis, but elsewhere. And like, I imagine there's going to be a lot of tech people that make products like Knowetic in the future, if they don't already exist, for behavior analysis specifically, because our field is one that people see as a way to be innovative and make money and all that, which I know is not not the driving force behind anything Amanda does. Sorry, this is the longest question ever, but basically my point is, with your level of expertise, right? And like you said, having a little Amanda on your shoulder, I think it's really, I'm very curious to hear like Joe and Nicole, because Joe, I know like you were certified, you're not so much newer as when we first started the podcast, but still you were certified within the last 10 years. Nicole, I can't remember when you were certified, but just in general, I'm curious, like, what a difference it would make to have access to a little dinosaur BCBA who's informed and analytical and problem solving, that's not like rigid and going to just tell you to do the same things over and over. So that's the part I wanted to like dive in on a little bit more, like really big take home for me, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I talk about the software as like a digital mentor or digital bumper rails, again, to keep somebody sort of in the parking lot of what they need to be thinking about, rather than, there's sort of two different poles of decision making. On one end of decision making, you have binaries, right? Everything's either yes or no, black or white, this or that, right? And on the other end of the spectrum, you have the paradox of choice, which is when you go to the grocery store and you go to the yogurt aisle, right? The fact that there is a yogurt aisle is mind-boggling, right? And what happens when you have a yogurt aisle is it suddenly making a decision about which yogurt you want to eat becomes overwhelming. And so those are the two sort of bookends of the decision-making spectrum, right? And so we don't want either. We want somewhere in the middle, right? Which again is the digital bumper rails, is getting you somewhere closer to the amount of information that you need to think about to make a decision that's not just a this or that, right? Because people are not binary. They're not ones and zeros. They're not black and white, right? They are a full spectrum of things to think about, right? So you don't get to just pigeonhole people and say, oh, you remind me of this kid, so I'm going to do the same thing that I did with that kid with this one, right? So I think the wisdom of 20 plus years of practitioner experience is that things just aren't black and white. They're more complex than what is on the surface, right? And I think that's the beauty of this type of software, because it's asking you to think a little bit further. Like, have you thought of this? Have you also considered this? Have you also considered this? And here's an array of possibilities of different things you could do with this person. There is no right one thing, right? So you have to employ your intervention, put together your treatment program, take your data, look at your data and determine whether what you decided is actually effective, right? And if it's not, then you update that decision-making process. And that, again, that's what the software is helping you do. So I think it's the benefit of this software is helping you think like a seasoned 25-year practitioner.
Yep.
And that's tough too. Like just becoming new into the field, that idea of learning how to be analytical and actually like really think about choices and what you should be doing. Like that's something that they don't necessarily just teach you in a class either.
No, and I think it's worth knowing that, again, I'm not an academic. I always joke I didn't go get my PhD. I went and got my membership at Menza. It was cheaper and faster, and means about the same thing, right? And so again, this is not an academic exercise at all. It's based on practitioner experience and things that I employed regularly in my day-to-day practice, which I think is very different than coming at it from an academic point of view.
Yeah. And I I'm curious too, like, is there any thought, I mean, is there any plans in the future to incorporate like research articles or like, or is this just like based off of what you have experienced as a practitioner and what other practitioners are utilizing and think is saying like, yes, this is like the best route for my client? Like, how's that data set like being utilized?
Yeah, so lots of different things. First of all, we're already on version 6 of the software,
Mhm.
right? So it will never stop evolving. It will continue to evolve based off what we learn from the data, what we learn from the user feedback, and what happens in research and practice, right? As new journal articles come out, if new information comes to light that there are different types of interventions that work more effectively with different types of people, then the software will continue to grow and update based off of that information. Right now, what the software can do is that if you as an organization, let's say, Joe, you've got one organization, Megan's got another organization. Let's say you both have different philosophical backgrounds about how treatment goes. Joe, you can upload the journal articles that sort of guide your philosophical background into Knowetic, and Megan can upload hers into her software. And you guys have two different silos of information, and when the clinicians are asking about treatment recommendations to Knowetic, it will draw from the literature that you have uploaded, right? So if you believe this article versus that article, then Knowetic will basically have that perspective within the actual software system for you. And again, as the data set gets bigger, what will happen is that we will be able to look from organization to organization of who seems to be really good at functional analysis based on the data, this organization over here, and who seems to be really good at toilet training based on the data. Oh, these people over here are getting really good outcomes. And who seems to be really good at desensitization of dental procedures, right? And so we'll be learning from all of the different organizations and their outcomes data at the same time. And again, updating the software to reflect what is effective, right? So that everybody benefits from that data. So it's elevating not only each of the organizations, but the field in general and outcomes for all the constituents.
So
That's
wholesome.
awesome. Yeah, I know.
Mandy, for that piece of it, with the data being collectively like put into the system, is that something that businesses will be opting in and out of, or is it automatically part of the process?
Yeah, there'll be options, how your data is used, et cetera. But in general, within the user agreement, you understand that that's sort of part of the point here, is that we're trying to figure out what optimal outcomes look for different behavioral phenotypes.
Yeah. Do you know
Yeah.
of anything similar? I know you said, medical doctors and things have been using this kind of technology for 50 years. Do you know of anything similar for the type of work we do as behavior analysts, or is this the first of its kind?
I definitely think we are the front runners in this type of clinical decision support system. I know that there's lots of different data collection groups that are programming clinical decision supports in at the data level. So I'm coming at it from a 40,000-foot view, like top down, right? Whereas the data collection groups are usually coming at it from a bottom up, like a micro to a macro, whereas I'm going from macro to micro, right? So the data collection groups, how they're using AI and clinical decision support systems is when your data is not trending correctly, right? You're supposed to be in an acquisition program and it's supposed to be going up and to the right. Those systems will say, hey, bing, 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 your data is not doing the thing that it needs to be doing. You need to make a decision about what's going on with your data so that you get the trend correct, right? And so those are like goal related and daily data keeping related clinical decision support systems, right? Whereas I am coming at it from let's get you in the ballpark of starting with a 6-month goal that might lead to an outcome that is actually meaningful for this family, right? Because what currently happens a lot is that families will go into a provider and they'll say, hey, my 8-year-old son still isn't toilet trained. He only eats 5 things, right? And we can't go to the grocery store anymore because he pulls everything off the aisles. And the practitioner says, okay, great. We'll do the VB map and the Vineland,
Yeah.
which have nothing to do with what the family just told you is going to be a meaningful quality of life outcome for them, right? And so the software Knowetic is designed to get you to a place that you understand, oh, this is what's going to be meaningful for this family. And here's an assessment tool that might actually be sensitive to measuring a baseline for this outcome. And then in 6 months, I can redo that assessment and determine whether or not I've moved the needle on the assessment so that we actually get to an outcome that's meaningful, right? Rather than just saying, oh, we got 20% more of the ables filled in this last 6 months. Like, who cares?
Right.
Yeah. And I full transparency, I operated like that for many years because that's how I knew to do things. And but again, it takes 25 years of experience and synthesization of all the information and feedback and mistakes that you've made to learn how to do this better. And that you can't shortcut.
Right.
No,
Yep.
it takes experience. And then, yes, I mean, if you need to do the Vineland for insurance purposes, you can still do that. But, what really matters is what's going to be meaningful for that family.
Mhm.
So I like that. Like your system can also like suggest um, other resources out there to utilize to take baseline data or assessment data just to see what else is out there rather than the run-of-the-mill Vineland BB map. And it gives other
Well,
suggestions.
I'll give you a piece of big news we've just gotten in the last week or so. But speaking of PFA, Megan, Dr. Hanley's given us permission to build the BHI out into the software. So we will have a digital version of the BHI, which will have a full digital repository for all of that data. So we'll have outcome data related to the BHI living on the software that people can actually use within Knowetic.
That's awesome. And for
That's
those who
amazing.
aren't
Right?
familiar, BHI is a behavioral health index, and it's a way of measuring changes, especially if you're using, it's not just for using the PFA SBT, but it's one of the measures that Hanley and colleagues have been using with their research. That's really,
Yeah,
really
I really like it because it's a very simple it's very similar to the goal development model quality of life indicators that I built out because it goes through things like what degree of medication is this person on, right? Uh, how restrictive is their um, are they toilet trained? Do they have a feeding intervention in place, right? There's things that really do cover your sort of day-to-day indicators of whether or not the degree of which your autism may be affecting your quality of life, right? And it's a very simple Likert scale, right? That again involves sort of a question interview process with a parent, but it's very meaningful day-to-day outcome data, I think. So I think it's a really quick and effective tool.
that's excellent. One of the things I was thinking about, Mandy, when you were talking about having the data and being able to see certain patterns and things like that. Well, there was a couple of things. One is, as you mentioned, this is the first opportunity. So in terms of getting a better understanding, like a lot of the times as behavior analysts or even other medical professionals or teachers, anyone making decisions right now around what are the best interventions or paths to take, there's a little bit of research that I'm familiar with. I know like Dr. Kathy Lord has done and some other folks on longitudinal studies to look at predictors and outcomes. So if certain skills are taught at certain ages, the outcomes are better. But that's pretty much all I've seen regarding that. So finally being able to have that information, and when you're sitting down to talk with parents about certain things, we have to sit and say, these are the various options for intervention. And a lot of times people are choosing just based on what feels good for them or whatever, or just like what they know the best, what they're most comfortable with, et cetera, instead of actually making informed decisions. So I'm super excited to see that progressing in being more of an option within our field and for the clients we serve. It reminded me of a workshop I did with Dr. Rick Kubina and Dr. Garner and Adam Peel. We presented a workshop at ABAI in 2014, I think. I can't remember, 2013 or 2014. And it was on using the standard acceleration chart and functional analysis. And that's one of the things like Rick was really big on and really pushing out there about people, charting instead of using whatever other methods they're using, because with the chart, you can make better predictions around which interventions are working better. And really being able to look at, like right now in our field, when we look at the data, especially on challenging behavior, we don't really have a way to say, oh, when it looks like this and we pick this intervention, we can expect this outcome. We don't. And he always was comparing it to, other health professions where he's like, if I go to the doctor and I have a heart problem and they see this reading on the EKG, they know based on that reading what treatment to give me and the percentage probability that that is actually going to make a difference. And as a data-driven field, we can't do that. And I know we're working with human behavior and it's very complex and nuanced, but still it's wild to me that a data-driven field doesn't have that technology available to them to be able to say, oh, based on this profile, this is actually the best thing that we could do. And these are the results we can predict based off of that.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that we're trying to address ABA for autism, like autism is a monolith, is insane,
Right.
right? Like the number of behavioral phenotypes just within autism, we don't even know what kind of numbers we're talking about. Dozens, right? At the minimum, dozens of types of behavioral phenotypes within autism. And then if you stack that on top of the fact that sometimes you have individuals that have diagnoses of autism and ADHD and Down syndrome and OCD and gastrointestinal disorder and seizure disorder, right? Like, all the different ands that go on top of that. And then toss in the fact that I can go into a room of 400 clinicians and say, raise your hand if you know somebody that got a diagnosis of autism, just so they could get services. Everybody in the room raises their hand, right? So the idea of trying to come up with something prescriptive as a treatment for autism is insanity. So to your point, Megan, what we're trying to do with the care navigation model and building out those behavioral phenotypes and having that standardized intake process to understand who are all these very different people coming into your care is the ability to say, there's all these different types of people and we understand better who benefits from 10 hours a week at what age versus 40 hours a week at what age, in what setting, and so on and so forth. It's way too complex to try to paint with a broad brush, right?
And I just think about all the people, well, especially in my own training, like all the people who likely, even if they hear that their clients have certain other diagnoses, they're not attending to that. They're not learning about what that means for anything because they were taught as behavior analysts, observable, measurable behavior is all that matters. We don't need to worry about supplements, diets, all of these alternative, things that are out there. and I'm not trying to give weight to those things necessarily, but there are legitimate diagnoses where other things are going to be needed. And if we don't understand, it's not that we have to be the ones to fully understand every single one of those interventions or things, but especially being able to have at our fingertips a much quicker understanding of how everything interacts with everything else, and what we need to be taking into account with our clients is going to be huge, and hopefully help take behavior analysis off of the pedestal that it was placed on by certain people, so that we can see, like, it's not just about us. There are plenty of other experts and folks that need to be involved in providing care to someone.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's one of our charges is to work as a collaborative care, right? That we need to actually be speaking with the speech therapists and going to the doctor's appointments and talking to the special education teachers and understanding all the different environments that touch this individual, right? So yeah, we we probably need to step off of our own pedestal a little bit here, indeed.
Yeah.
And I tell you what, like I see it so much more now, like, and how important it is to take all the different aspects of the individual, not only just autism, but also like schizophrenia, and other like mental health disorders. Is like, while working with adults, it's like there's so many other things that are impacting this individual that you need to know.
Oh goodness, yes. I mean, this is another one of my talking points, right? Like, let's assume we had two individuals with autism that came in and had the exact same behavioral profile, except one of them is in a food desert and the other one is in an affluent community, right? You're going to have completely different outcomes for those two individuals just based on their social determinants of health, right? So it's not just their diagnosis, it's not just their physical diagnoses as well. It's also their environment, right? Have they been able to access all of the care that they need? If not, why? Right? Is it because of waiting lists? Is it because of geography? Is it because of money? Right? Yeah, you've got to look at all these patients holistically in addition to their behavioral profile to really understand how to set them up for success prior to day one, right? Because if you've got, let's say, the parents are having some type of mental health condition themselves, um, that needs to be addressed in order to best set the client up for success so that they could potentially have a behavior plan in their household, right? Or if mom and dad can't get on the same page about how to address a particular behavior, you're not going to have an effective behavior plan in a household, or especially if it's a divorced household where the kid lives in more than one location, right? So yeah, you have to know intimately what is going to be this individual's strengths and what areas they're going to need supports in place for in order to set them up on the right path.
Absolutely.
So, Joe, we have about 15 minutes left. We like pre-wrote out some questions, but they've all been kind of covered. But I'm
Yeah.
curious, Joe, you did the trial. Did you have anything you want to share with folks around what that experience was like? And of course, Mandy, before we finish, it would be helpful if you can tell people how to learn more about Knowetic and if you're still offering trials and things like that.
Sure.
Yes. Yeah. And my experience with it was so user friendly as far as like what I need to, where I need to go, how to input the information. Um, Using software was just so user friendly and fast. I think the one thing that I noticed being in this field for, oh, it feels like it was just yesterday, but it's not. But but it's like how much brain power it takes to conceptualize around a case and really plan out what you want to do. It takes a lot of time. And that's the most valuable resource that as a behavior analyst is time. And we is something that we lack is having time, because not only are we behavior analysts, but we're also parents. We're brothers, we're family members, we're a coach, we have a whole nother life. And the one thing I appreciate with the software, it helps speed up the process and really allows you to learn more about the client so much quicker. That doesn't take away the fact that you still, as a person, as a clinician, need to learn about the family and be open to listen to them and be a part of um, just working with them, but like just a ability to cut down on some of the time to learn the information was amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about the fact that best case scenario, you get 8 hours approved for your initial assessment, right? That's your best case scenario. And
Best
in
case.
that 8 hours, you're supposed to do a full record review, interview with the parent or multiple parents, multiple households, depending on who all the caregivers are, right? Um, at least 2 observations, hopefully in 2 different locations, right? Then you're going to have to actually research what kind of treatments you want to do and then write the plan, right? If you think all of that is happening in 8 hours, you're cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, right? So again, having the ability to query all the records immediately and then be able to say to Knowetic, write a 2 paragraph summarization of all the different therapies this child had, and bloop, it writes it for you, and then you can copy and paste that into your treatment plan. Like that is game changer in terms of getting some of this stuff done. And then the other thing, I think about this all the time is with the amount of turnover that you have within the industry. Let's say BCBA over here in my clinic quits, and now I've inherited half of their caseload as well. Well, now I can immediately learn about the caseload that I just inherited by chatting with the kids' documents and all the different intervention plans that the other BCBA already put in there, right? So it's a way of getting up to speed very quickly with new clients as well, especially if they're being transferred from clinician to clinician.
And that's fantastic too. So I do have a question and was wondering about like when people are or clinicians or other um, companies are looking at utilizing AI or some type of software, what questions should they take and consider or what questions should they ask or what considerations should they look into before jumping into just utilizing AI or just like
Yeah,
are you I
I
mean
think you need, yeah, I think you need to understand the security, make sure that it's not a web-based AI, right? So is it HIPAA compliant? Is it FERPA compliant? Where is the information stored? If you are using tokenization, uh, making sure that there's no patient information that is going back and forth on the internet, right?
Wait,
There really
Andy,
needs to be a,
tokenization
uh-oh.
is, because I think most people are going to think about like token boards or something. What is tokenization?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I forgot about the crossover. So tokenization is when you use Chat GPT, the tokens are the way that the it is the packaging for the text information that's going back and forth from the internet to Chat GPT, right? So one token may carry an average of 750 words. Think of it that way, right? So it's the currency of how all the information gets back and forth between the software and the internet or the data set at large, right? That's tokenization. So yeah, making sure that that's not roaming around on the internet for all the world to view. That's what's going to make it not HIPAA compliant. Um, but there's lots of different AI solutions that are coming out within the industry. I think it's going to help everybody a lot. Um, there's scheduling software that is happening that can quickly, rearrange everybody's schedules in less than 5 minutes, where it would normally take operations managers 2 hours every morning based on cancellations and sick call outs to rearrange everybody's schedule quickly within a clinic. Now there's an algorithmic AI based machine learning taught scheduling software out there that can quickly do that for you. I mean, that saves all kinds of operational efficiency. There are, I think, Central Reach, I think, even has an AI component that is helping to write session notes at this point, right? There is AI being used to clean up and catch billing practice issues, right? So there's all types of different use cases for artificial intelligence. I think Knowetic, excuse me, and Knoweti are very distinct, and again, in the approach that we're taking for a 40,000-foot view into the clinical quality.
I love that question, Joe. Super helpful. Well, we have a few minutes left before I turn it over to Mandy to give us any closing thoughts. Nicole, we appreciate you being on here with us. Was there anything that came up for you that you want to ask about?
I do have a question, but it's not about this specifically. It's not about AI specifically. But kind of a passion thing for me is expanding the reach of ABA outside of autism, being someone who spent the first half of my career not in early intervention or autism. So since you're such an innovator in the field, what do you see as a way that we can get ourselves a seat at the table outside of autism?
Well, do you have any particular areas that you're thinking of?
Oh my gosh, like all of them. Like substance abuse, human trafficking, government entities, anything that doesn't run efficiently that has to do with people. I always just wonder, like, why isn't there behavior analysts in this room to be part of this discussion?
Yeah, I mean, I think people are in autism because that's what got the attention of everybody about what applied behavior analysis is. Initially, the boom of it in the last 10 years. But as simple as showing the data, right? Like, do a research, publish your data, write the journal articles, get the information out there, right? I think there's lots of different practical applications. Like, surely somebody can solve some of Southwest Airlines issues by using applied behavior analysis, right? I'm certain that there is a way into the Kentucky Derby, right, by using applied behavior analysis, right? I'm just not the expert on those particular issues, but I think it is research and dissemination, right? I think somebody's got to get out there and apply the science, do the research, and write the papers.
And Mandy, like just out of a quick answer, I know we didn't talk about this yet, but just from following things that you're posting on social media or when we get a chance to talk for 5 minutes at a conference, you obviously have been out in the world at these various places presenting and showing the different tech that you're coming up with. And those aren't behavior analytic events that you're going to. So maybe if there's any tips from that, like, did you just research them and put your name in the hat and all that and get there?
Oh gosh. I have come to learn in the last few years that people like to hear me talk. And so I get invited to a lot of different things. And it's just, I'm also a really good networker. And so if I see a connection between things, then I'll sort of follow the ball wherever it bounces. I recently got to speak at the Cannes International Festival of Creativity in Cannes, France, in the south of France. And that came about because I was meeting with a group in New York City called Havas. And they have a network called Havas Health and You. And I met with the C-suite and back to back a bunch of folks up there through a friend of mine from Center College. And within 20 minutes of me talking to the chief strategy officer of the global Havas Health, he says, gosh, the way you're thinking about this and how you're talking about this is right in line with what we're doing. Would you like to come sit on a panel and talk about this at Cannes? And in my mind, I'm thinking CAN, can, like something autism network, right? Like I have no idea what he's talking about. And so the meeting ends and my buddy from my college looks at me and says, well, you played that awfully cool. And I was like, what's CAN stand for? And he's like, Cannes, France, Mandy, south of France, June, like Cannes Film Festival. And I was like, oh. So I didn't even realize I was being invited to an international stage at that point. But that's what happened. And then somebody saw me speak at Alameda, California, and said, "Hey, I want to work on writing a book with you," and that happened. And then somebody saw me speak somewhere else and said, "Hey, we've got this conference coming up in Philadelphia that's called the Grace Hopper International, which is the largest gathering of female and non-binary technologists in the world. It's 30,000 people attend every year." And so I just keep making new connections and hopping from lily pad to lily pad. It's just how I move.
So one thing as a person that also tries to network and make connections that at least for my experience, I think some people don't necessarily realize happens first. Did that just happen overnight, or were you connecting with people the whole time in your career and eventually it's turned into this?
Yeah, I think this is a culmination of 25 years of experience and honing my craft as somebody that runs their mouth. And also just knowing a lot of people and frankly being a large and delicious food pellet, right? I'm a pretty good reinforcer in general. I pair well with people. So yeah, it's a combination of skills. It's no one thing.
Yeah.
Hashtag it's not binary. There, I made it happen.
I think sometimes when people see someone doing a bunch of different things and they're like, "Ooh, I'd love to do that." They're like, they think it just happened overnight and they're just, "How do I do that?" And it's like, spend 20 years, 25 years putting yourself out there, connecting with people, reading things, spending money on stuff. Like it doesn't just happen overnight. But the biggest part I think that a lot of people get nervous about is that initial putting yourself out there. They're, "Oh, that person won't want to talk to me," or "They don't, who am I? They don't want to hear from me." I never experienced that. I was just like, I have things to say. I will say them to these people and they can take them or not. And I just never had to overcome that. I'm guessing you didn't either, but
No, I mean, I think again with age and experience, uh, it it it's not about me, right? Like I am not important. My ideas are important. I feel very passionate about my ideas. I feel very passionate that I want to do this in service of helping the field of applied behavior analysis in a world where autism exists. Like that's my whole get up and move every day. So when you take yourself out of the equation, when it's not about you, when it's about the message, it makes it a lot easier to go do what you're passionate about.
yeah. And Nicole, I know you
Yeah.
have a lot of great ideas too. So let me know how I can support you too. But hopefully this is like another push in that direction for you. All right, now we're down to 2 minutes. So let's close it out. Mandy, what are your closing thoughts for us, or how can people learn more about all the incredible things you talked about today?
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me. Yeah, I am not hard to find on the internet. So if you Google Amanda Ralston, BCBA, you will find me all over the place. I have amandaralston.com, my personal website. There is nonbinarysolutions.com. That's the company website. Either of those will also give you a link to Knowetic.ai so that you can see about the software. If you want to follow me on social media, I always like to say that I am vaguely professional on LinkedIn. I'm mostly authentic on Instagram, and I am completely unhinged on Facebook. So whatever your flavor, you can buyer beware, follow me at one of those. I'm very accessible, always happy to take an email, set up a call, whatever you guys want to do. But most of all, please come test out the software, sign up for a demo. Would love to show you what it can do and hope you get to become one of the early adopters.
Awesome. Thank you. I know we said we'd keep it at an hour and we're exactly at the hour, so I won't ask any more questions or say anything else. Joe, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, just go ahead, go forth, and do better, people.
Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much.